it's midday now. Every time I do this at 12 o'clock, I always get confused. Anyway, good afternoon, and yes, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. People listening on the radio, don't forget crossroads.co.uk. Don't forget about that, and also people on podcast. You know what to do. Just press that little green button, and you come into it. Thank you so much for coming on. Um, Trace, Tracy May Orton. Now, Tell me about yourself. Tell me about yourself.
Okay, so I reside in Australia, born in New Zealand. I was born to a family where my dad was a schizophrenic with a lot of mental health issues. Mum was an alcoholic, so I had a very tragic childhood. As you know, people that have those sort of childhoods, I was abused by 12 men before I was 12. So I pretty much grew up on my own, grew up the hard way, and pretty much into my early 20s, I realised I would need to find some answers to life, Steve. So I went looking to see where I could find them and how I could find them. And it became a long journey, but I found some real keys to overcoming what I'd been through and becoming the woman I am today. So I reinvented myself at 50 and became a mentor and life coach, teaching other women how to get over the same.
Okay, brilliant, really good, and congratulations for that. That is
Thank you.
brilliant. That is really good. Um, so in the beginning, you were talking to me about mental health problems and stuff.
Yep.
Explain what you've been going through. What happened?
You know, I think mental health is something we should be caring for every day. But sometimes I think we just forget that people can actually be mentally unwell. Like my dad was a good human, but he was mentally unwell. He was a diagnosed schizophrenic with 5 dissociative personalities. So he didn't actually have any opportunity to be anything other than that. But as you would know, Steve, when you're around that, when as a young kid, you are so pliable. So of course he was a cruel dad at times. He was a harsh dad at times. He wasn't even my dad at times because all personalities showed up at different times. And so for me, I grew up with this very low self-esteem, lack of self-worth, didn't believe anything good would ever happen to me, didn't believe I was worth anything. And so, like a lot of kids going from that, your own mental health is affected and you don't even know it because nobody tells you or nobody educates you on it.
Yeah, and the trouble is, I'm sorry to hear that, but the trouble is, there's not a lot of stuff out there at the moment for like help or support. You
It's
know,
true.
and I know we got Mind and we got other organisations and stuff, but there's not enough around the world to cater for everybody. I'm afraid.
No,
Uh, it's
definitely not.
really, it's really, really bad. Um, and when your dad was being horrible to you, how did you feel?
You know, to be really honest, I learned to get numb really young because there was really no way for me to cope with it. A lot of my tragedy, a lot of my abuse started under 12. So I was really immature, obviously, because I was under 12. So I had no idea how to cope with it, no idea how to process it. So I learned to be present and non present. I learned to be numb. And I think that that's what I'm so dedicated to doing for tonight because it's 9 o'clock where I am on a Friday night, but I wouldn't be anywhere else other than on your show, Steve, because I'm so passionate now about people talking about this and people coming to terms with the fact that when you've had that sort of childhood, there is repercussions that you carry into your own mental health as adults, and you have to be able to address it and heal it.
And that's what we do on Crossroads here. We deal with all this and we cover all different subjects about life and everything. Because you
That's
come to a crossroads in your life and you don't know where
fantastic.
to turn to, and that's why we do things like this.
Yeah,
Um,
lovely.
and thank you very much for once again for coming on and sharing. The trouble is, so sometimes when we come to that point in our life where we've had all the abuse, we've had all the problems, everything, our mental health can kind of like turn and we can get really bad. I remember in my life where I went to a certain point where I wanted to jump off a bridge and
Mm,
just end it, completely
yeah.
end it. And but then I had to I had something in me saying, are you, you're really, really selfish. You're really, really kind of like, it's all about you, and at a certain point, it was true, really. I just wanted to end it. I didn't care about no one else in
Mm,
my life. I didn't care about anybody. All right. I was married to a lovely person, Michelle, and I'm still married to her. And I tell you
that's
what,
great.
I won't change it for the world. But what I'm trying to say is that we all in life, we all have our ups and downs in life,
We do. We
and
most
and
certainly do.
sometimes when we come to a certain point, we find it very difficult to handle that. How did you handle yours?
I think at 18, I was caught at work one morning by my boss drinking. I was putting Baileys into my coffee. And when he asked me what I was doing, I made a joke of it, which he didn't find funny. So he sent me off to see I worked for a really big brewery company, and we had our own psychologist on site. And so he sent me to see him, and I spent some time with him. And he asked me some questions, and I can remember clearly, Steve, for the first time ever deciding I would actually tell somebody what had happened. I was born in the early 60s, so there was no support, there was no talking about it. I was born to a Tongan mother and an Australian father, so in the Polynesian culture, it was accepted that it would happen. We never talked about it, nobody stepped in to help, everybody pretended it hadn't happened. So I made a conscious decision in this office to talk to this guy, and he changed my life because at the end of it, he put his book down that he'd been writing in, and he leant forward and he looked me in the eye and he said, "You will need to be medicated. You will probably be dead by 30 and you will never contribute to society." And when I tell that story, people get horrified. But to be honest with you, the girl that was in his room actually needed to hear that. The girl that was in his room, that was actually her path. And he actually gave me this big wake up call. And I realized that I probably had to address some of the stuff because I thought I was hiding it all, but I wasn't. I was a big ball of a mess. I had big mental health issues. I was a lot of self sabotage and a lot of stuff like that because I didn't know any different. I didn't know I mattered. I didn't know I would ever matter to anyone. And so I just began to study and look and go searching because it was the early 70s by the stage what it was that people that didn't come from my home, because back then it was very rare to come from my home, what they did differently. And I began to study and discover some keys, and I put them in a book 7 years ago, which I sell all around the world called The Unhappy Smile. And when I applied those, that was when I really began to see some change.
Yes, and you certainly changed, didn't you? Because you
I
kind
did.
of like you kind of like you heard the message. You kind of like got encouraged. You started writing a book, and you came and and I applaud that. I think that was really, really impressive because
Thank you, Steve.
yeah, no, lots of people, I talk to lots of people, and I'm if I think something's wrong, I tell them. If I'm really kind of like upfront what I say. But the trouble is, see, now you got your book. Now
Yeah.
now you're reaching out to people. Are there certain times where in your life you're thinking, I shouldn't have done that really because there's certain people that now doesn't want to know me, or are you glad that you've done it?
I'm really glad I've done it. I don't talk to my mum or my dad or my sister, so there's only my sister and I. Our family broke down a long time ago. We got broken really early. My sister and I were abused very young. Dad was abusing mum. Mum was drinking to cope with it. So our family dynamic broke down really, really young. So we don't have any contact at all now. I believe my parents are still alive because I have family members that tell me they are, but there is absolute zero contact. So I think because I had that, I didn't really have a lot to lose. And all I really realized was that because I have four daughters of my own who are now in their late 20s, early 30s, But, 15 years ago, they were coming home with friends from school, and more those friends were starting to open up to me, and I realised there was a lot of people like me. There was a lot of people going through what I was going through. And the reason I wrote the book was this, because when I was 10 years of age and I was at school, I was the only child in that school without a dad at home. I was the only child who had no food. I was the only child being hurt. Those statistics in Australia now, I don't know what they're like in England, but in Australia, those statistics have swung to 90% of children in our country are feeling the effects of broken homes, and 61% are feeling the effects of domestic violence. And that is on the increase since we've had all our lockdowns during COVID. So that's what motivated me to write the book. And I thought, even if some friends, I haven't had anybody not like it, I haven't had any negativity, but I thought even if I did, that it was worth it, because I wanted to get the book in the hands of those young people.
Yeah. And tell me about your book. Tell us why you wrote it. Tell us how it's doing.
Yeah, so I wrote it because I realised I had something to say. I realised that I'd discovered some very simple things that were no longer being thought about by people or taught anywhere. And so the book is based on 9 chapters, and they're broken up into 3 parts based on the Serenity Prayer. So the first 3 chapters, I talk about coming to terms with the things you can't change, because we can't change our personality, we can't change the family we were born into, we can't change our backstory. And you would know, Steve, of anyone who's ever been hurt or traumatized or abused, the first thing we try to do is fit in. We try to change to make whoever's upsetting us happier. For me, it was always, let's be quiet, let's just disappear so nobody finds us, nobody hurts us. And I'm a really outgoing person by nature. So in the first 3 chapters, I talk about how you can never change that. You have to accept that that's who you are. And then in the next 3 chapters, I talk about the courage to change the things we can. And I talk about anger and grief and how they are masking emotions. When they show up in our life, they're showing up to show us other things that are going on. You can't get angry unless you have fear, hurt, rejection, or pain. If none of those things are present in your life, you can't just get angry. You can't just get angry. You have to have a back emotion. And of course, with grief, it's always loss. So I just talk about that and having the courage to face those and realize that when they show up, they're just saying something really nice to us. Excuse me. And then in the last one, I talk about bold love and forgiveness.
Yeah. Well done. Do you have a faith? Have you got a faith?
Yeah, I do.
So do you believe in God?
I do. I do believe in God. And I think actually realizing I was made by God and I had a plan bigger than my family really helped me overcome. Yeah.
Really good. I'm a Christian too, so
Great.
And, just a couple more things I want to jump into. You say about your mum and dad, about
Yep.
that you haven't seen your mum and dad for years now.
Yeah.
Are there anything that in your life that you regret, or because all us Christians sometimes feel that we need to kind of like forgive and forget. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I do.
Are you prepared to kind of like just and find out where your mum and dad is and kind of like settle your differences, or are you past that now?
I don't know that I could ever do that with Dad. There's a lifetime AVO out against Dad. I'm not sure that I'd ever feel safe to do that with my father, although he's a very old man now. He's in his late 80s, so I'm sure it probably would be, but it's not something I really want to do. I have forgiven him. I forgave all 12 men, was a really big process, and it's a big chapter in the book where I talk about how we can do that. Mum and my sister have just chosen to feel really differently about it. They haven't really done the healing that I've done. So they have quite a disdain, I guess would be a word, for me and how I talk about it and the things that I'm doing around the book. So there's not a lot of hope there, but I live in hope that there could be one day. But at this stage, there's nobody really wanting to do it. But my heart is very clear on the fact that I love them and I forgive them. But we have a lot of water under the bridge too, and sometimes you just have to let that have its time, let it work itself out.
Right. Okay. Okay. And um, and with your children now and everything now and your family and everything, what's it like now?
So I've been married for 35 years. I'm actually married to a pastor. My
All right.
husband's been a
Okay.
pastor for 25 years. We have 4 adult daughters who are all married, and we have 9 grandchildren. And Paul, I often say I had a rough start, but I've had a fabulous life. And I truly believe that God brought Paul into my life because he's such a great example of what love should look like to me. I dedicated the book to him because his love has really helped me to heal. He saw the woman I am today 35 years ago, and I was nothing like her. I was a very insecure young woman who wasn't even sure. I wanted to marry him. I loved him. I knew God had brought him into my life, but wasn't even sure I could make it work. And when the girls came along, that was when I started to attend courses. I started to go and see somebody because I really wanted to give them the best. I'd had a really beautiful relationship with my grandmother, and she taught me a fair bit. So I instigated all of that old fashioned sort of way to raise a kid. And then I went and did a lot of work on myself so that the girls would never have to live mum's story.
Well done. Really done. Really good. And what are your goals in life? What kind of goal do you want to get to?
One of the goals that I have in life is I would love for us to all be able to have conversations around mental health and DV and sexual abuse and demystify it and actually reduce our tolerance to it so that we can begin to let people heal and heal publicly, and we can begin to pull it up and stop it. That is one of my lifetime goals. I will pass away talking about this stuff because it is one of my lifetime goals that we are empowered enough now to live in that state where it's okay to be like that. It's okay to heal. Let's put all our resources into that. But let's educate people how not to do it. Let's say no. Let's say we're not going to take it any longer.
Yeah.
Privately, so I'm doing that through a lot of books. I'm writing a lot of books. I'm writing a lot of courses. I do a lot of speaking all around the world now. It's all on this sort of profile, so it's knocking me around a bit at different hours of the time. Um, but yeah, so that's pretty much what I want to do. My husband and I are about to move to a farm early next year with some of our kids. We're going to just sort of do a bit of communal living for a while here in Australia. COVID has changed us quite a bit. We don't have COVID right now in Queensland. We're very fortunate, but we do have to seriously look at how we live and how we move forward, just with the cost of living and some of the requirements that are going to come into play. So we're going to purchase some land over Christmas, and we're all going to move on to there. 3 of the kids are going to come with us, so there'll be about 12 of us living there. So it's a bit of a big change for me next year.
And is your husband still going to be being a pastor, or?
He's actually stepped down from that now in his mid-50s, and he's doing more sort of community work.
Right. Okay. Brilliant. Brilliant. I'll tell you what. I'd love for you to come back and talk more about your books and what you do more. There's never enough time in the day, is there? You know what I mean?
True,
And
there just isn't.
it isn't. So that's what I'd love to do. What I'll do is I'll get my wife to contact you
That'd be
and try
great.
to book you in, if that's okay with you.
Love to. I'd love to.
All right. And
Yeah.
thank you very much for coming on and telling me your story. And I'm so thankful that you can share your story to many of us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
God bless you. Bye bye.
Bye.